So this lecture is from chapter 10, and it is specifically on sexual behavior and how that relates to motivation. So first, let's take a look at the biological background of sexual behavior. Much of what we know about the physiological mechanisms that underlie sexual behavior and motivation comes from animal research. Two of the things below that we've learned from animal research is that the medial preoptic area, which is an area of the hypothalamus, is involved in the ability to engage in sexual behavior. However, it does not affect sexual motivation. Second thing learned, the amygdala and nucleus accumbens are involved in motivation for sexual behavior, but they do not affect the ability to engage in it. So this seems to be the areas of the brains that work together that motivate someone for sexual behavior and provide the ability to engage in sexual behavior. Some further research that has been done on sexual behavior, and this was done on humans, not animals, was done by Dr. Alfred Kinsey. In 1947, he established the Kinsey Institute for Research, Sex, Gender, and Reproduction at Indiana University. Then in 1948, he published Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, and in 1953, he published Sexual Behavior in the Human Female. So Kinsey's very, very well known for his research into sexual behavior. So let's look at what he found. He found many things, but again, multiple conclusions. But one of the most popular conclusions is that sexual orientation, which can be defined as an individual's emotional, romantic, and erotic attractions to other people or no people, is not binary, but exists on a continuum. And he developed a scale to determine where someone is on that continuum. We'll look at that in a minute, but first let's look at some examples of questions Kinsey asked to determine where someone was on that continuum. And of course, he asked many, many questions. These are just two examples. First example, when you're out in public watching people pass you by, who do you feel attracted to? 4 options you could pick: only to people of the opposite gender, mainly to people of the opposite gender, but sometimes to people of my gender, mainly to people of my gender, but sometimes to people of the opposite gender, or only to people of my gender. Second example of a question, if someone asked you to define your sexual orientation, what would you say? I would feel totally comfortable saying I'm straight. I would feel comfortable saying I'm bisexual. This question would stress me out. I might say bisexual, but I'm honestly not sure where I fall. Or I would feel comfortable saying that I'm exclusively gay. So Kinsey used these questions and many others to determine where someone fell on his continuum. So let's just look at his scale. His scale went from 0 to 6, included bisexual in the middle, and then heterosexual and homosexual on the ends. And he would place people in one area of that scale depending on their answers to those questions we just reviewed. William Masters and Virginia Johnson, who came a little bit after Kinsey, they published a book in 1966 detailing the results of their observations of nearly 700 people who agreed to participate in their study of physiological responses during sexual behavior, so physical responses. Unlike Kinsey, who used personal interviews and surveys to collect data, Masters and Johnson observed people having intercourse in a variety of positions, and they observed people masturbating manually or with the aid of a device. While this was occurring, researchers recorded measurements of physiological variables such as blood pressure, respiration rate, as well as measurements of sexual arousal, such as vaginal lubrication and penile tumescence, or the swelling associated with an erection. So they looked at it more from a physiological perspective, as opposed to Kinsey, who looked at it from, again, surveying people, personal interviews. So they did a lot of research on the physical aspects of sexual behavior. As a result of their observations, they divided the sexual response cycle into 4 phases. Let's look at the chart here that goes through those 4 phases. There's an excitement phase where physical changes begin to occur. a plateau phase where arousal deepens and breathing, blood flow, and heart rate increase. There's the orgasm phase, which is involuntary rhythmic muscle contractions occur, leading to intense pleasure. And then there's a resolution phase. The body gradually returns to its baseline state. So that's what they discovered. They discovered, again, this physical aspect of sexual behavior, the sexual response cycle. And going back to the Kinsey Institute, as I mentioned, it's still alive and going. They continue to study many topics such as sex and aging, condoms and protection, HIV, online dating, sexual violence, many other things that are kind of interesting to look at. But you can't click on this within the lecture. But if you'd like to look more at the Kinsey Institute, that's the website for you to go to. So that's a little bit about motivation and how it relates to sexual behavior. Again, if you'd like to learn more, I would go to the Kinsey Institute website and look at a lot of things they've done. As always, thank you for listening, and please reach out with any questions.